Hello there. Welcome. Fireside with Peter Adkison. I'm Peter Adkison. I do not have a co-host today because I have 4 guests today. I have Rich Redmond, Joanna Redmond-Smith, or the Smith-Redmond?
Redmond-Smith.
Redmond-Smith. Eric Cagle and Adam Conus, who all worked with me in the customer service department at Wizards of the Coast. And so we are here on Gen Con TV. We are broadcasting from Chaldea Studios. And as you know, on this show, we go in search of the untold stories behind your favorite games. And trust me, you're going to get some great stories today from this group. And by the way, somebody had the idea of Christmas sweaters. So I guess that makes us officially the Christmas episode for Fireside.
Yeah, this doesn't date at any point.
So here we are. Yeah, so hey, guys, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
On the show. Yeah, it's so good to hang out. Oh my God, this is going to be fun. So what I like to do to begin with is kind of go through with, for each of you, briefly who you were before Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering. Starting with you, Rich. We're going to go in order of how you guys, when you were hired, which I think was Rich, then Adam, and Joanna, then Eric. So tell us a story of how you got into this mess.
Okay, so
and who you were.
I was an Army officer. I served from about 88 to 92. I was in Desert Shield and Desert Storm. I got out of the Army. I moved out here, and I was not working a lot of great jobs, but I had jobs. And the point of that is, like, the joy in my life at that time was I would go to Games and Gizmos on Bellevue Way.
Oh, the local game store.
Right?
Yep,
and I would go and I would run, I think Shadowrun 2nd edition was about that time. Or I would play in whatever game was going on. And one of the managers was a guy named Kyle Namvar.
Oh gosh, okay, yep.
So Kyle and I got to know each other, and he knew about my military service. He had seen me interact with customers in the store. He knew I was working in retail. So I sort of had qualities that he desired.
And Kyle, just so everybody, was the customer service manager for Wizards of the Coast at the time, or was that
this was even before that.
Okay.
Because
but that's where he would become, and that's why he's part of this story, right?
Yes. Okay. So 1993, Kyle is about to go to Origins. Yeah. Which would have been the release of Magic the Gathering, the first big public debut of Magic. And the battery died on his laptop, on the laptop that I had sold him. So he calls me up, I grab a battery out of the back, charge his credit card real quick, drive over to his house on the east side to deliver this battery so he can make his flight. And he asks me, am I happy in my job? Am I maybe looking for work? And so shortly after that, I did 2 interviews. One, I distinctly remember Kyle and Riot Hall both being in the room, in a little conference room in the office on Oaksdale, and one interview with your then wife, Kathy.
Right.
And then Kathy went to Scotland for 6 months.
Right.
And I was going to game night at WotC. Regardless of what else was going on in my life, Thursday nights I would go down.
That's right. We had game night at the company. Oh yeah. Yeah. Thursday nights until it got too big and popular that we couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah. That's how I got to know like Dave Howell and Carol Monahan and Wade Racine and Alex von Hochtret and a whole bunch of other people who worked at Wizards. And then Kathy came back, and I've been talking to Suzanne Sundet like every week on the phone. Where are we in the hiring process? And
they kept you on the hook for 6 months?
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I started interviewing in 1993 and didn't start until the end of May 1994. Chris Ferris started 2 days before I did, and I came in, and it was the open house was my first day. My parents came down, and Peter introduced himself to my parents as the head janitor.
Well, there we go.
I'd forgotten about that.
Okay, so May 1994, you get on to Wizards of the Coast. And what was your first job?
Kyle hired me to be his assistant manager of customer service.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Now, Adam, your turn. Right.
Yeah, so
Top that.
While Rich was defending our country in Desert Shield and Desert Storm, I was an art school dropout.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
So I was working as a temp at Microsoft with Paul Peterson, who later went on to become an R&D person. And
He's okay.
He's a fancy schmancy game designer.
Yeah. We had him on the show.
Yep.
Yes.
So in any case, very similar. I was brought in for, are you happy with your job? Well, I was angling for a Wizards job for a while. I had been showing up at game night with a little bit of that in mind.
Probably how we met.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I remember meeting, Richard Garfield and all of that crew. And Richard would have a new game every week, and you'd play it, and usually
All
it
those
was
times are so special. He'd come in like, "Hey, want to play a game?"
yeah, and it was almost always good.
Yes.
Which, if you're used to game designer games, they're not always so good when they start.
Yeah.
Anyway, came down, would you like to come in for an interview? And I did, and I was ready to answer rules questions because I was going for a rules
And
customer
when is
service.
this now?
It's got to be 94.
94, okay.
Yeah. And
Close enough.
It gets
The
hazy.
Dark was new when I got hired.
Okay.
Okay. That been summer of 94. We've
missed-
narrowed it down to the right season.
I missed the whole Legends thing, so I was just a fan for that.
Okay, late summer.
Yeah. Probably just after Gen Con is when I got hired. In fact, it would have been October. So, yeah. Anyway, showed up for the interview, had how to do banding nailed, because that was the question I was ready for. I was not ready for questions about pop culture.
Yeah.
But I nailed them anyway.
Yeah.
And became a customer service rep, along with about 4 or 5 other people I got hired right around that time. And started doing
So
the
when
Wizards of the Coast thing.
when you say pop culture questions, do you remember any of them?
Not a single one.
Because I distinctly remember Kyle Namvar asking me, what does it get if it doesn't put the lotion in the basket?
I think that was
And
on
I
his
almost,
list. I think
and,
we
and
all
it's
got
Yeah.
because it's
Question 9.
the way he phrased it was like the opposite of the way it's used in Silence of the Lambs. So I stumbled for a second, and they were getting ready to move on to something else, and my response was something along the lines of, well, I just don't want to get the hose again. And they were like, okay, he knew that one.
Yeah. Good. All right. Okay, Joanna.
What? Now that we're narrowing things down, I realize I actually did get hired before Adam. Let's see. Before getting into Wizards of the Coast, I was
Art school
suddenly-
dropout.
No.
Theater nerd.
I was a theater nerd, yeah. But I was suddenly realizing that I had a degree in theater from University of Washington, and that was great. And I had gone the tech direction, so I was working at the Green Lake Theater as a master electrician for the theater there, and realized just how desperately over my head I was, and that I was
gonna
not
say, you're
ready
an
for
electrician?
this. Yeah. Well, no, a theater electrician.
There's an electrician.
Is that like a film crew?
Wait, wait,
gathering?
sorry, no.
Sorry, a theater electrician, not doing all the lighting and everything.
All right.
And I realized, I was just out of college. I was not ready for this job, and I got laid off before very long. But I was dating Scott Hungerford at the time, who was another member of the customer service team. And he got hired on it at Wizards.
Right.
And then suddenly I was unemployed and couldn't pay my portion of the rent. And luckily, great parents who helped out a lot. But
Were you living in the house up on Capitol Hill at that point? That big ass
with
house?
Scooter.
The house
Yeah.
on Capitol Hill? Yeah, back
house.
there was only one house in Capitol Hill back in those days.
No. The house
We
with
lived near that house.
Okay.
Clearly,
You
there are
know,
2 houses on Capitol
there
Hill.
was
Yes.
Okay.
the one where she lived and the one where he jumped over a hedge and disappeared.
That's a different story. We'll get to that.
Yes, we'll get there. Anyway.
Okay.
Where was I?
Feel pain from it.
Yes, we were living in the house on Capitol Hill. But
brings
so
me joy.
Scooter got me an interview. Scooter got me an interview at Wizards, and I remember Richard Garfield was in on my interview.
Oh my God.
And of course, Linda Beardsley, who was our HR person, and
Yes.
this was. I realized this was June of '94 because I got hired right around my birthday.
Okay.
That Richard was in
So
an
it
interview.
was-
I don't ever remember
He just kind of probably
Richard
wandered
in an
in and
interview.
just kind of wandered out.
But he did have
I
a.
think it was sort of, he was just there.
Our policy with Richards, he had a free pass. He could just
Yep.
walk in and out of anything
Yeah.
he wanted to. So I guess it makes sense. He
Yeah, I
stumbled
don't
into
think
an
he asked
interview.
any questions or anything, but I just
probably-
remember him being there
he
and
probably-
being like, oh my God, that's Richard
He
Garfield.
probably thought he was in an R&D meeting.
So what did you get hired for?
I got actually hired into the convention planning group.
Group.
Team.
It
That
was
was it.
her and Suman and.
And Barb Hines.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes.
I don't remember whether she got hired just before or just after me, but the three of us were the team.
Yes.
And I did mostly, I was inventory and shipping. So I made sure that, whatever supplies we needed were there, the pieces of the booth got where they were going, made sure we had the inventory that was necessary. And then it was my job to make sure it all got back properly and got back where it belonged after the con.
Yeah. That's probably the part of the job that we didn't tell you until after you were there.
My job really didn't have a description when I started
None
it.
of our jobs
A
did.
lot of us were like that. It was like, do this thing we need. I don't know.
Show up and put it in work.
Just do it. Just
we
do
were
the
figuring
thing.
it out. Figuring it out. Right.
And then I eventually got into the customer service department from convention services.
All right, let's get you on
So
board.
mine's pretty short and sweet. I actually didn't know anybody here at the time, so I had just moved out. I graduated from school, and like any good college grad, didn't have a job.
Right.
Didn't have anything going on. I was living in Illinois at the time. My parents had moved out here. They were they lived in Olympia. My dad was in the military. Excuse me. And so I reached a point. I was living with my brother after school back in Illinois, literally delivering pizza. I'm like, I have a degree and I'm delivering pizza. This is stupid. I got to get out. So I said, Mom and Dad, moving in again. Thanks. And so moved across country, moved in with them. Couldn't find a job. I went to school for radio, television. I was going to be doing this basically. I was going to be doing television stuff.
Oh, here you are.
And here I am.
You finally made it.
That didn't work.
Finally made it.
Thanks.
Woo.
But at the time, I was like, well, and I went and worked at like B. Dalton. That's still the bookstore.
Yeah,
That's
bookstore.
long
Yeah,
gone.
yeah,
So I had
yeah.
jobs like that, and then I had a job at Kinko's.
Right.
And then I realized, what in sweet hell am I doing? I have to do something. So
Yeah.
here's how I got into Wizards of the Coast. My brother, who was also living at my parents' house at the time, my oldest brother was going through the newspaper and looked in the jobs in the help wanted section, which was still a thing,
Right.
and said, there's this company in Renton. They're called Wizards of the Coast, and they're looking for people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Wizards of the Coast, how do I know that name? They own that Talislanta role-playing. I had no... So I was poor, and I was moving around a lot. I had no idea like what magic was at the time or anything like that. I had no idea. So I'm like, sure. So I did up my resume and sent it in. And here's how I got the job. Was because I decided at the time, first time making a resume of any kind.
Right,
And so I put my name there, and there's on Microsoft Word, the wingdings, the little font for that. And I found these little curly Q things. And I said, I'm going to put one on one side of my name, little thing. Yeah. And I sent that in, and Shaw Cote said, I liked your resume because it had the little swirly deal. And that's how I got in for an interview. And then I survived the gauntlet shark pit of everybody in the room asking you, weird questions
Nerf
like
guns.
with Nerf guns and like flashing strobe lights and music and things that are just like, what time is the darkness? And you had to answer fast, things like that. And then walked out of there and I got a job. And so because I didn't know anything at all about magic, which I don't know why the hell you guys hired me, but whatever. They put me in non-rules customer service, which was run by Alex at the time.
God,
Alex
that's
Von-
right.
and with Christy Furia.
Okay.
Christine Furia. And so we did everything to do with customer service that wasn't actually answering rules questions.
Okay, so let's use that as a transition.
Sure.
So tell me more about that, because I want to find out what is like what you guys did.
Let's set the stage.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So
The Tundra.
in May of '94, we were in one building, and it was mostly an open plan building, just a big open space, and we had nothing. Like the day I came to work,
Eventually we got.
We were sitting in the dirt.
Okay, we had something.
It was a building. We were inside.
Yes, we had walls.
Yeah, because
We had
Seattle
heat,
rain
light.
is a
There were
thing.
some fabulous Boeing surplus desks
There were.
for us to
Yes.
sit at.
Not when I started.
Oh,
Yep.
predating the Boeing surplus
Yeah.
God,
desks.
you
When
were
I-
like at the kitchen table, weren't you?
Yes. Chris Ferris and T. Brian Wagner and Kyle and I were in the kitchen at Wizards of the Coast sorting. There had been some production problem with Arabian Nights where stores would get like either all A boxes or all B boxes, but you couldn't, no matter how much you bought in that store, you couldn't get a complete set. So Wizards was helping people do exchanges so that they could get stuff. And we had all of these Arabian Nights cards that had to be sorted. And that literally was my job. And it's funny that you said that you didn't know anything about Magic when you got hired.
Yeah.
Kyle didn't tell me anything. I literally had picked up Magic because the people that I had met at Games and Gizmos, who I gamed with, taught me Magic the Gathering and taught me about Magic the Gathering. And it wasn't until I got in the door that I put 2 and 2 together and realized I was going to work for the manufacturer of this game.
Okay, so this is like back in the days.
We
like,
had no phone.
There was a phone in the kitchen, right?
We used
Yes.
the phone in the kitchen.
There was a phone in the kitchen. So if you got a call from customer service,
Which was
customer
rare,
service,
but yes.
was rare at the beginning. Yeah, it would just go to the kitchen phone, and
If the kitchen
like
phone
the
rang,
sound.
we had to run in and answer it. We had one computer, which, like T. Brian Wagner was the one who was answering email at the time. We had one computer to answer email with, and that was it. And so over the next couple of months, as Adam and Joe got hired, everybody got a desk, and eventually we all got Macintosh computers, and we're all actually capable of doing work. But there still wasn't any. I think maybe the 800 number was published even after you got hired. Like when you came on, there was
around
no 800 number.
Okay, yeah, because we didn't really have a phone.
Well-
we weren't taking calls at that.
No, prior to the 800 number, there was a 206 number that was
Right.
printed on every booster pack.
Yeah.
And now that you tell the story about the Arabian Nights thing, my guess is that was what started training people to start contacting us for customer service stuff. It's like, here's an offer we have. And once that sort of opened the floodgates, and it started out as a dribble, and the dribble got more and more intense, and then probably about a year into it, so it would have been 95 or so.
I mean, we could talk about technology that nobody who's watching this will remember. Like our original email program was like a Linux program that ran on the Macs, and it was text only. There was no graphic user interface. There was nothing. And occasionally, very clever people would figure out how to use the chat function, and that chat function would take over the screen involuntarily, and you couldn't see the email you were answering. It was.
I do have a story though about the customer service phone number though. I think it was Kyle that set up the number originally, and if you dial it, it would go doot 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 doot. It was Mary had a little lamb. So
Was that on purpose?
that was totally on purpose. Kyle
sounds like
he's
Kyle.
like, I can do whatever phone number I want. Yeah, that was Kyle. Yeah.
oh, that's so
Mary had a little
funny.
lamb.
Yeah. So we got the Boeing surplus furniture in
Yep.
there.
So
Yep.
now let's loop back around to what Peter was saying.
Yeah.
What was work like in non-Wills customer service?
So we got a lot of cards in. So same thing of like, oh, we didn't get the Arabian Nights stuff, but also like cards that were like damaged in manufacturing or like offset or something. We would replace those.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, and usually there were some you would get and you're like, oh, come on. Are you serious that you want to get these replaced? Because they were a little bit, but people were perfectionists, right? They wanted it to be.
So you just take that card and put it in the supply to send to somebody else.
So yeah, and we would just do that, and we would do all sorts of stuff like that. But it was mostly also answering questions about. We kind of answered some questions from stores every once in a while until there was a merchant relations group. But for the most part, it was a lot of just kind of logistic stuff. And after a while, it was kind of like, is there anything else I can do? You know, because get a little repetitive. Yeah.
Right.
So they said, I forget who, you guys or something, was just like, you want to go to a show? And I'm like, yeah, let's go to a show. The first show that we went to, though, that I went to, was the massive everybody in the company pick up and go to Gen Con.
Oh, yes.
In 95? Well, that was when
No,
or
it
95
would
or
have been
96?
94.
Yeah.
Oh. but I got
Well,
there
we
in
probably
95.
did it in
Well,
95.
we probably
maybe
did.
you did,
The
but-
first time he went was
Yeah.
probably 95.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for Legends release, maybe. Were you there
No,
for
it was
Legends?
after
No, it
Legends.
was after that
Then it
because
would
so
have
much.
been in
So as
95.
as we're dating like what epoch and era we were
Right.
there. So
Right.
I remember everybody's. I like Legends. That was a legend. You know,
Yeah.
Arabian Nights, whatever. We were there. I was there at the time of Fallen Empires.
Okay.
Like Fallen Empires was still a thing.
But you
and
were
then
at that-
Homelands.
yeah.
And then Homelands immediately after.
Fallen,
right?
so, for anybody who's not like as conversant with the history of Magic the Gathering, right? Fallen Empires was the very first set where we actually had enough printing volume that we could make enough cards to fulfill every store's order. And all the sets up until that point had trained the stores to order like 4 times as much as they really wanted in order so that when the distributors made their allotment, the store would actually get what they needed.
Right. Yeah.
And so I can still remember like walking through the area where sales and merchant customer service were, and people like Carol Monahan were on the phone with stores going, look, you're gonna get everything you ordered. Are you sure you don't want to cut back on
Really
this?
want that much?
And then afterwards, we would hear stories about like a semi pulled up to some mom and pop game store. And literally the amount of Fallen Empires in the semi was enough to fill every cubic inch inside their store. And some of them just went out of business because,
that's too bad.
Sorry.
but others overcame. But Fallen Empires actually started the like wave of phone calls that every set that came out, we would get phone calls saying, this set's a bad idea, it's going to kill Magic the Gathering. And we were like,
They're still getting those, by the way.
Every set is going to kill
It's
Magic
so
every
the
funny.
set is
Gathering.
going to kill
Yeah.
Magic the Gathering.
To be fair, Fallen
Yeah.
Empires really legitimately had the angle on doing that.
Yes, it
But
did.
then, and then
Yes.
we would get calls about
True.
how bad Fallen Empires was, and we were
so
going
bad.
So many people were like from WotC would go up and play Magic with Microsoft, and Microsoft players were just killing us with Fallen Empires decks. And when we did a new edition of Magic, right, Fallen Empires cards made it into the core set because they really were good enough.
There was like 4
It
or
was
5
just
good cards.
it was it's where we learned about the perception of rarity
Yeah.
Yeah.
and how that changed the valuation of a product.
I mean, failure is the greatest teacher.
Right.
And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened with Fallen Empires and Homelands as well, another kind of unsuccessful set, which I think really set the table for what Magic was going on. I mean, you wouldn't have ever learned those lessons without those sets coming out.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we were all new, right?
Yep.
I mean, we were all figuring out this business of how to make Magic cards and how
Well,
to
nobody had-
support them and
nobody
how to
had done it
promote
before.
them and everything else. And we learned a lot of lessons on the way.
Didn't hurt that Ice Age was kind of awesome.
I'm so proud of that though. When I look back at the 13 years of Wizards of the Coast, I did some pretty great stuff. But the thing I'm proudest of is that we were the first customer service team for a tabletop game. And no one had ever done that before. No one had ever done a collectible card game like Magic the Gathering before. And I'm so proud that I got to be even a little part of that history.
Oh, you mean both? I mean, I think
It was such a cool time. I mean, just everything that was happening.
Yeah.
It was for a stretch there. It was just crazy magical. Where you'd show up for work and something completely unexpected and kind of delightful is as likely to happen as not every single day. It was pretty amazing.
So that was my first professional job, my
Yeah.
first real thing, and it ruined every job.
Oh, yeah.
after that. Totally ruined.
Oh, yeah.
Totally ruined what it was like to go to work for like corporate America or anything. It was just like. But
Yeah,
where's the magic?
It
Where's
left
it
all of
really?
us ill prepared for
Yes.
the real
Yes.
world.
To continue this sort of like what was day-to-day work like,
Yeah.
we spent a lot of time playing Magic
We
the
did,
Gathering
yeah.
with each other.
Which is how I eventually went into actually answering those
And
questions.
trying
Just through
to-
osmosis of just like, playing.
Right,
doing that.
right.
trying to come up with like ways to take advantage of the game mechanics that we had learned from R&D and nobody else in customer service knew, or trying to stump each other with interesting decks, or trying to make theme decks work. And that went on a lot. And there was a certain amount of jealousy from other departments in the company that I heard about as being part of the team management, that like customer service never does any work, And why do they have so many people? And I was like, why don't you come to work at like 7 a.m. on the Monday after we release a set?
Yeah.
Because I can show you, eventually we got tools to track how many calls we got and what the calls were about. We didn't even have that when we started, but eventually we got them. And I could literally have like graphs I had done in Excel to show, like, this is when a set comes out on a Tuesday, and then on Saturday and Sunday people get together with their friends and play the game, and on Monday our calls spike.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's since customer service was about spending time with the customers.
In many ways,
I'm wondering if we might have some stories about interesting phone calls that you received, or interesting letters, or from customers.
So hopefully you'll get Jeff on the show,
Jeff
Jeff
Harris,
to get on the show sometime. But so we had to answer. Should we talk about the satanic panic?
Oh, I think we should.
Okay.
Yes,
So-
for sure. Let's talk about the satanic panic. Yeah, I'm getting thumbs ups from
So-
the production crew.
I think probably I'm in my 50s now, so I was actually alive and gaming in the 80s when a lot of the satanic panic around like D&D was going on.
Yep.
And so we were actually aware that we were entering that minefield, at least aware enough that we got Mike Stackpole to come in.
Oh God, that's right.
He was the industry expert
Yeah.
about
Because
the
he had
satanic panic.
testified
Yes.
at a TSR, the original owner of Dungeons and Dragons, was famous for, if they got sued, they would just pay it off and not go to court. And one day, for some reason, they decided, this is a bridge too far, we're going to court. We're going to fight this. And Mike Stackpole was like their expert witness.
Right.
And so Mike came in and gave us training, but then Jeff became
I'd forgotten about that.
See, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Jeff became our subject matter expert.
That's right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Because he's like, yeah, okay, I'll do it.
Jeff, you're pointing Eric, but just clear, Jeff's not here. We might be able to get him for,
hopefully
Jeff
we'll get
had,
him in future episodes.
every time, and you were there when it was happened. So every time we would get like a phone call, mail was one thing, but usually a phone call when you could hear, usually a mother that would call and would be like, your cards are, this game is evil. And let me tell you why. And it would be, hold please, you would like press hold and go like, Satan call! And Jeff, and it would get immediately routed to Jeff. Now, I only heard bits and pieces of what he would tell. I don't want to ruin this story for him because it's so good to hear him say it. But one thing, it boiled down to one good story.
You brought it up.
I'm
so we
sorry,
gotta tell
Jeff.
it.
I'm sorry.
I gotta finish.
Yeah. So one time, so basically he would just talk him off the ledge and just be like, we don't really, whatever. But ultimately, one time I think he had it with some person when it came to that, and he just said, they're like, we're gonna take these cards and we're gonna burn them, and he's like, oh no, ma'am, don't burn them. They have a little plastic interior or a little inside, and that'll produce toxic smoke. No, we highly recommend that you shred them. And she's like, what? And he's like, well, we already have your money, so. And so she went away. But I like that it was a health hazard, not like or anything else. But
Yeah, I have to say, whenever anyone would call me and say you are all in league with Satan, you have to go and look at our employees at the time, and
oh my God,
and it's sort of hard to not just say, "Ma'am, not all of us are."
A good 30 to 32% are not.
The joke that we made, I think at the time, was, of course I'm in a league with Satan. We bowl every Wednesday.
And your reference there, for those of us, there was a lot of people and a lot of employees of Wizards, especially in the earliest years, that were part that in some sense the company grew out of the Camarilla in some way. The White Wolf, Vampire the Masquerade, World of Darkness, fan group.
I think I'm the only one of us that actually played that. But
we were all just adjacent. And
we used to brag that the Bastet were in the Camarilla in the live action game because of her.
I was the first official Bastet player, yes.
Oh, there we go. Well, and we had Riot on the show, by the way.
Yes.
A couple months ago. And so,
Love Riot.
But there was, we did have a big goth contingent. Now, not to say that goths have anything to do with Satan.
And
a few of them, though. I mean, if you asked, that's the answer you would have gotten.
She would
yeah.
you know.
Oh yeah. And the interesting thing to me is that a lot of those people, once they were working at Wizards, migrated into the Duelist Convocation.
Oh.
That's what we called the organized
Convocation.
play back in the day. And so the whole concept that we have now of like the Pro Tour and leagues and
Grand Prix and
Grand Prix and organized
TCI,
D&D adventures or Friday Night Magic, all of that came from the ideas that these people had about that they from their experiences in the Camarilla of having one rules set that wherever you went, if you could find a game, that was the rules set and you already knew it.
Right.
Usually conventions.
So conventions. Did you? I think. About stories from the road.
Customer service people, because we had so many people skills that we had to have, we were a favorite for convention travel. Almost every convention, they would pick one or two of us to go. And the best duty I thought was to go be a gunslinger. To take your magic decks and just, you could sit down at the booth. It was like the one time I went to San Diego Comic-Con, we were doing one of the first Grand Prix, and I remember that, I can only remember his nickname. I so apologize to you that I can't remember your real name. But the Hammer.
Oh, the Hammer.
Came down for that Grand Prix, and he waited at San Diego Comic-Con. You would just get in line. You wouldn't know what was at the end of the line. You would just get in line. And so he got in line and waited and came up and was doing gunslinging. And at that time, I had what we would now call a red-green speed deck. And I had 3 or 4 uncommon cards in it, and everything else was a common card. And it just played so fast, it would overwhelm people. And I played the Hammer, and I beat him, and he went, I'm going back to my hotel room. And he went back to his hotel room, made some tweaks to his deck, and then won that Grand Prix. I don't know if he was playing the same deck that he played against me. He could have played a completely different deck. But that was one of the best. The worst convention experience that I had, and it's not the one you're thinking of, Peter. The worst one I had, I can't even remember which show it was, but it was the one where I remember it was after we had done the first video recording of any championship game.
With
the one where Sean
and Paul
Sean Carnes and Mark Rosewater did all the commentary.
They were all in
for
tuxes?
Can't remember about the tuxes. I couldn't actually see the screen it was playing on, but it played behind my head on infinite loop for 14 hours a day. And it was, the reason why it was the worst was because we hadn't done, as a company, we hadn't done adequate planning, and that information, that help desk, that information desk, had no way to contact anybody else on the convention team. We didn't have a walkie-talkie, we had nothing. So I'm literally standing there doing the pee-pee dance, hoping Kyle will wander by and relieve me long enough to go to the bathroom, get something to eat, and then I'd come back out. And I did that for 3 days, and I was the only person in the booth. I'm like, I'm never traveling again. And I literally came back and told the customer service team, travel is no longer mandatory for you. You can just, if this is how we're gonna run things, you have the absolute option to just say no. And you don't have to go. Word of that got out.
We had.
What? Oh, I was just going to say, I just got my little story. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the artist, which would make this a lot better. But one of the best times I ever had at Gen Con, was sitting next to the artists working the booth like you did as a customer service guy. And I was next to Paulo Parente, who was awesome. That guy is amazing.
Great artist.
All I've ever heard of Paulo is these
and somebody else, he was the my favorite artist of the time, and I can't remember his name, but he was holding court next to me. So he'd be up there, and the other artists would do sign stuff, but he was holding court. So he had a stack of things to sign, and he was doing sketches. But he would be sending people, players, customers, out into the con to retrieve things for him in exchange for sketches. Somebody brought him a jug of pure maple syrup and got a sketch for it. If he needed lunch, get me lunch and I'll sketch you something, and lunch would come.
Where do you get maple
My
syrup?
very
at a
favorite,
convention?
and this is a little off color for the family viewers out there, but the best thing I've ever heard an artist say is, if you buy this print, I guarantee you will get laid.
Wow. So there was also.
I don't know if he backed up that guarantee or not.
There was a time though when the company was sending us to almost any convention.
Yeah, we did a lot of conventions.
And big or small. And actually, we went to a convention together in
New York, the New York SuperCon,
which was neither in New York proper nor super, and not really even a convention. So
there's a lot of good things about that weekend. First thing about that weekend, Frank Sinatra died that weekend.
Frank Sinatra. So we got sent. Yeah.
Oh, that's sad. That's not good
Well,
news.
here's part of the
Frank Sinatra playing in this empty hotel 24/7.
So we went to it was up in the it was a
That would've
hotel
been okay with me.
up in the Catskills.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of those
Okay.
huge hotels, but it was off season. So
Right.
which is how they could book this thing. And it was supposed to be. They said like we're gonna have like 5,000, 10,000 people show up to this thing. And Adam and I were like, okay, we're gonna go and do the show. We went there and flew into New York and then drove and finally got to the place and we're lit and there's like nobody there.
It's huge.
It's like shining.
The Shining Hotel.
The Overlook. Okay.
Yeah, the Overlook, and there's nobody in there, and it's like our hotel room is like at one end of the hotel, and we're wandering around, and there's like not a soul in there. And with the creepy carpet, we're waiting for blood to shoot out of the elevator and small twins to look at us. And so, but there was a convention there. There were people there, and it had the guest lineup was kind of nuts. So imagine like this huge convention is supposed to be 5,000, 10,000, and there was 400. Maybe over
400?
the course of the weekend.
Yeah.
And over the course of
That counts as like
people.
that's turnstile. Somebody comes off 3 days. That counts as 3 people.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it had Gil Gerard.
Yep. Q.
All right.
Q from
yeah.
and who we hung out with a little bit.
Yep.
And John Delancey.
John Delancey.
Aaron Gray.
Aaron
also
Gray.
from
Sure.
and
Is that the show where like you were at an after hours party with Aaron Gray watching one of her movies on TV?
yeah.
She did like a silk stockings
Yeah.
kind of thing where she's like in her underwear for the whole thing, and it's like watching it with your mom.
Yeah, it was not comfortable at all. It's like I mean, there was like I don't know 18 people, maybe less in the room, and you're all just kind of like.
So Xena was a thing back then.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the guy who played
Still is
Salmonius
in
on
some
the
parts.
show,
Yeah.
Salmonius was there,
yeah.
and he did this amazing talk, and he played Son of Sam in some movie, and he did a little talk about that. And a kid came over, so, 12 years old, and it's like, "Do you charge to sign autographs?" And the signing booth is right over there, and he goes, "Young man, I am paid to be an actor."
Wow.
Oh, that's so great.
Nice.
That's so
We
great.
could tell 1,000 stories about that. It was the creepiest,
It was the
weirdest
best
weekend.
food we had all weekend had to have been Pizza Hut.
Yeah.
By a
Because everything
a
was closed.
long
There
shot.
was it was so bad. And I just remember when
this is-
Gil Gerard stomps out of your
is-
convention, you know
this
it's
is
not
all of the celebrities knew they weren't getting paid.
Yeah.
So,
sorry,
Joanna, did you ever have to go to one of these?
You know,
conventions?
I went to conventions more actually before I joined customer service, but it was when I started really working with customer service quite a bit, and got to know the guys from the UK office.
Oh, the Nightfall Games crew, right?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
Which
Yep.
show was that?
So let's back up a little bit.
Well,
Gen Con 94.
right.
Peter announces at like the last minute that everybody in the company gets to go to Gen Con,
Yeah. Sure.
right? Which
Well,
we weren't really
yeah.
Not everybody.
including the Nightfall Games guys.
Right.
Yeah.
And the decision from Scotland, and the decision was made so late there was no hotel space anywhere in, because this would have been Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No. So we're
Milwaukee.
So this is before any kind of like in-car GPS. Cell phones are the size of briefcases. we have no way to navigate at all, and we're staying miles away from the convention. And
we had the big van that we drove back and forth in.
We rented 4 or 5 full-sized vans, which everybody is following me down the highway because I was an Army officer, therefore I know how to navigate, which any Army sergeant will tell you, no, I did not. But we managed to get there safely and things worked out.
He still had one.
What?
But I think this is where you want to pick up the story. At the end of Gen Con, when Peter gathers everybody together at the booth and says, it's been a great show, you've all done a great job, I want you all to stay here and clean up, but I have a meeting I have to get to, and left. And 30 seconds later, there's nobody left except customer service and the guys from the Scottish office.
Yeah, that was pretty much my response. Because at this point, it was my job to make sure everything got packed up, put back together, and shipped back where it belonged.
We got that stuff done like freaking aces, though.
Now, was this not also the weekend when I had lost my voice?
Yes, it
This
was.
was the big problem. I was sick. And
we were dating by then.
Yes, we were dating
did we
at the
establish
time.
that they're married?
Oh yeah,
Did
we
we establish
eventually
that?
got married. Now we were together for about 4 years, but we did get married before I left Wizards.
Are we? No.
So
The
you're at
convention. We're at Gen Con.
Packing up. You have lost your voice.
Well, throughout the weekend, I'm supposed to be directing traffic, and So Rich did a lot of yelling for me, but also the guys from the UK were just the sweetest.
Oh, they're great.
And they were always taking care of me. You know, there was always one of them who could come listen to my, stressed whispers and yell for me.
And a Scottish brogue.
Not really helpful in instructing the rest, but
intimidating, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something needs done. What?
And just out of love and respect to those guys at Nightfall Games, I don't know if you know that they did a Slay Industries.
Yeah, Kickstarter.
I heard that they had done that. Yeah.
So Slay Industries
I'm
is
still connected with
out
some
there.
of them on
Yeah.
Facebook, and
Good for
But
them.
yeah, at
So-
the end of that con, here I am. I've been sick all weekend. I have like no voice by Sunday. And we've got to get, I think we had was it the Mana Towers, the Mana Palace?
yes.
By then, which is just this huge setup that's all got to come apart in the right direction, and get packed up properly. And yeah, suddenly it's me and the customer service guys are all that's left. And they were great. Everybody, jumped in and tried to, interpret my mime and, hoarse whispers and just we're great at running around.
So
Can I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that we have to establish before, because we're running out of time. So
yes.
it was all about your voice.
Yes.
So one thing that we have to establish about customer service and Mojo, as we used to call her back then.
Yes.
So she had one phrase that she used to say a lot to us.
Especially in the middle of customer service meetings.
So sound guy, be careful.
Yeah, when did I mention I was a theater major?
And you were running the department basically. Is like.
Well, I was
admin.
Kyle's sort of right hand.
Right.
Yeah, Kyle was the creative influence on the team, and I was mom.
Yeah, that's very good, right? There were the 3 sort of leadership roles where Kyle was the visionary.
Yep.
He had a big strategic vision for what he wanted customer service to be like. And Joe rode herd on all of us to make sure that we were getting the work done.
Well, and
my job as the assistant manager was the tactical execution of Kyle's vision. How did we get done what Kyle wanted to do?
Right, and then I was customer service mom, and yeah, we'd be in the middle of trying to get through a customer service meeting, and there's this story and that story and there's another story, and everybody's talking over each other by then, and the famous one meeting is when I stood up and said, "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!"
So I was one of the...
Amazingly, they all quieted down.
You were
that
terrified.
just encouraged her to do that more.
Yeah, it really did.
But
I was mad with power.
I was one of those managers that if I didn't have an agenda, we weren't having the meeting. That just was a thing. If I don't have an agenda for a meeting, I'm not making everybody come to the meeting. So Joe actually had like broken down by time.
I loved our meetings. They were so fun.
This was before I had ever worked in software and knew what a stand-up was, but we got through it. So I do want to, Peter, I know you're trying to take control again, and I want to give it back to you.
Well, I want to give, I'm going to give this half of the table. So
Joe's, I want to do a shout out here as part of the Gen Con story that we were just telling, right? At some point in that, as we were packing up, we realized somehow we've managed to, we've so carefully rationed out how much magic we're going to sell on each day. We actually have more product left than we have pallets to ship it in. How are we going to get all the magic home? Joe's lost her voice. I'm losing mine shouting for her.
Yeah.
We don't have the full support of the company. And my hero, Ron Richardson, from the sales department, comes wandering back in just to say, hey guys, I wanted to check in, how are things going? And we told Ron about the problem we had, and he went, I'll take care of it.
Yep.
I just walked away and
proceeded
to horse trade with dealers to trade them magic cards for their spare pallets until we hit equilibrium and could ship everything home. God bless him. We
magic
got
cards
home
were a
from
currency back then.
Oh yeah,
You could
they
buy
absolutely
from that
were.
show
if you
because
really
of
wanted
Ron
to.
Richardson.
Yeah, I didn't have to throw away
let's,
pallets of crap.
I was just thinking back then. I was the rules guy. I was pretty much the main rules guy for a long time, and eventually they put me in charge of the whole department because that was my thing.
Yeah.
But it's not. But the weirder thing about being the rules guy is that I was totally useless at anything else. Let me give you a few examples. At the time, I would have deemed the Pro Tour as the stupidest thing we possibly could have ever have done. What an absolute idiotic thing that must have been. But that pales to the idiocy that the Pokemon game was. Oh my God.
I got
a story about that.
Okay. So I just wanted to share that while I was good at one thing, it's probably a good thing that I wasn't put in charge of anything else.
Yeah. So I got to comment on that. So that all hands meeting where Rich Fukutake came out to talk about, hey, we have this new thing that we're going to be working on. It's Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so everybody's in the room and we're talking about all this and they showed the video. And this was really before anime was a thing, or huge, and we didn't have streaming.
To clarify for the folks who were watching, the video was an episode of Pokemon that had not been translated into English.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're showing the here's the product, and he shows the video and gets done. And any questions? And there's murmur. And Adam goes, "Yes, Adam. What are we going to do after this fails spectacularly?"
And I don't remember saying that.
I do. And so I think you said later, we're going to use you as the opposite barometer of what to do for things.
No,
Adam, do you like it? Love it. Don't do it.
No, it's bad.
To be fair, right? I had exactly the same reaction as Adam did about Pokemon because I looked at it and said, let me get this straight. We're going to make a product about little kids who go hunting in the bushes for pocket monsters. Does no one see the sexual innuendo here? Because our customers are gonna.
Referring back to the Satanic Panic. You should say about the kid, that one call, the Pokemon call. I love that one.
So Pokemon went berserk, as almost everybody knows. It bought me my house. Did it buy you your house?
It did.
Oh yeah, bought me a car.
Yeah. So it was crazy, and we went from about 30 phone calls a day for Magic to about 130 phone calls a day per person for Pokemon. And mostly it was, where do you get Pokemon? But we also had a Pokemon League, which was where you'd go to the local store and play Pokemon with other people. It's not very complicated. But on the show, needless to say, I got a phone call from a very upset young man who wanted to be in the Pokemon League and wanted to know whether or not he had to travel from town to town like you do in the show to continue to play Pokemon in the Pokemon League.
That kid's still wandering the desert.
So it's funny. I had the same reaction about Pokemon. It's like, okay, so we want to bring this to to America. These guys would like us, and I knew that it was outselling Magic in Japan.
Yeah.
You know, I remember the first time our distributor told us that Magic was now the #2 game in Japan, and we all like
an arrow to the heart.
Oh
for
my
you?
God! And so it was a great honor. But I looked at it the same way. I said, this game is all based on anime, and in those days, anime was a fringe thing in the U.S. market. And the rules are up here, and this is a TV show for kids, but the game is not quite as complicated as Magic, but certainly more complicated than your Saturday morning television cartoon crew, right? And so I was I was against doing it as well. And the only thing that changed, the thing that changed our mind was that we knew that Nintendo was going to spend something like $40 million advertising it.
Yeah.
And so, well, if you're going to spend $40 million advertising, it's going to have a TV show, then I'm sure we can sell a few $1 million worth of Pokemon cards. And so I budgeted like $5 million of sales to the board. Our internal.
What did we actually
in
make?
total?
For the first year. Now I'm drawing a blank on when it launched. I think 99, right? Yeah. So we actually got some out the door in late 98, just in time for Christmas. So, but for the 99 budget, our internal estimate was $7 million. That's what I was holding that team to in terms of sales goals. But I told the board $5 million, and we did 400. I think something like that.
Yeah. All you could
400 million.
All you could get is the starter set for a good stretch. And I had a mom call me up, just furious that this box of cards that her kid wanted was full of worthless energy cards. Well, you need the energy cards to play the game, ma'am. Game? Nobody plays this. They just want the cards.
I was told to catch them all. I'm trying. Yeah.
All right, we only have a couple more minutes left. Any
Magic related
story?
God.
Magic related would be a nice bonus.
We used to, as customer service, we knew how to party back in the day, and we used to party at a house on Capitol Hill in Seattle.
You're saving
where
this for the last story?
3 or 4, maybe 5 Wizards of the Coast employees.
It varied.
Yeah, it was an in and out.
It was a hive.
But when we had a party, and we would refer to them lovingly as
Booze Up and Riot.
Booze Up and Riot.
Yes. Yes,
And
we had our customer service decompression parties.
Indeed.
And they were Booze Up and Riot, which is what
who
we
made
did.
one
God,
of the sales guys made the most
awful.
incredible alcoholic
Mark
milkshakes in the history of alcoholic milkshakes.
Sandler, something like that.
And Eric here would drink too many of them.
I drank just the right amount.
And so when I practiced karate when I was in college, and we would go out as the karate class, the club, we would go out and have parties. And since we were all at that point young and invincible, and since our particular style of karate practiced a lot of body toughening, we would play Ultimate Frisbee drunk. In the front yard, and it didn't matter. And so this was something that I kind of brought with me to the Booze Up and Riots. And one day at this house, I made a throw, and Eric yelled, "I've got it!" And he dove over a hedge and vanished. And none of us realized that the other side of the hedge was at least 6 feet lower than the yard we were playing in.
Yeah, dropped down to a
One of those
driveway.
Seattle
And
little
so-
tiny driveway.
At least it wasn't overlooking the freeway.
Yeah,
No, it was literally like something out of a comedy movie. He just went over and vanished, and all of us went dead quiet for a second. And then all of a sudden, we just see Eric's head pop up over the fence. He goes, "I'm okay. I'm okay."
Yeah, the alcohol, stopped the fall.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Cushioned it, yeah.
Yeah. Those are good times. Anyway.
All right, we're gonna wrap up with a question for each of you.
Okay.
And so, here it is. I mean, we've talked about what a special time that was. I mean, like you said, it ruined us for any other job after that. So we look back.
have a great
What
job.
what did you take from that era? Like what do you value when you look back in terms of who you are as a person now? It's like, this I really, really owe back to that time of my life. That
I'm going to say, because of the Wild West nature of how it was, that it's cliche to say, but anything was possible. Like, we were allowed to let our imaginations go wild, even in customer service, even in something silly like that. And also that we were able to input into every aspect of the company. Like, there were plenty of bad ideas, but we could put them out there. if we really wanted to. And so to know that it's like we could influence something as big as Magic and as later D&D and everything, just because we were told not to be afraid to speak up. So, and there are plenty of places I go to now or companies I work in. I'm like, boy, I really wish I could say something, and I can't. But at the time, they were like, we were young and didn't know any better. We're like, that's a stupid idea, and you go, point taken. We're gonna do it anyway, and it was successful. So, yeah, that's I think just being able to tell.
Yeah, by that like that example. We did have a freedom to do a lot of things, and we were involved in a lot more. We were a lot more ingrained in the rest of the company than a lot of customer service departments tend
Despite
to be.
our job title.
We had to fight for information and all that. But fast forward now, 20 years later, and I still use all of that. Yep. I got into the habit of speaking up and having opinions about things and spreading them around and not shutting up. Back at Wizards of the Coast, and
in all hands meetings, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. And I'm still like that
I'm changing my
at
answer.
work today.
Right.
Whereas other people, I think, probably aren't as much because they didn't have that experience. Maybe they came from someplace where they weren't expected to speak out, and as a result, they tend not to as much as I do. Because once you get me going, it can't shut me up. But until then, I'll just wait and bide my time.
All right. How about you, Joanna?
Well, I got a husband.
Yeah.
For one thing, he's my partner. It definitely is one of the most important things for me that came out of my time at WotC.
And it's heartwarming to see that the two of you are obviously still close.
We 21 years 21 years married this year.
Yeah, this past July.
Yeah.
I didn't know what's that.
Also, all of the Eric and Adam, I haven't worked with for, I don't know, almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Over.
But are still, people that I see and I'm happy to see. And, they're
We still game together every once in a while.
There's this huge
I see
network
Adam and his
of
wife
people.
at the grocery store.
Yeah, a lot of us live down in the south end there. So just this network of people and of all kinds of, artists, directors, writers, all of these amazing people that are still, in many cases, still part of my life. And that's really what I still have most important from my days.
A quick comment about that I could say about Wizards is that I always felt like every single person at the company was the smartest person in the room. Like everybody was.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot of chaff.
No, everybody was super smart.
Smart group. All right, Rich.
I'm going to give you two things. One of them was I got a real understanding of what genius is, and I'm not it.
Yeah.
Most of the time. But I literally
See it from here. There it is.
Yeah.
Back to Richard. Yeah.
Yep.
Not just Richard.
Yeah, exactly.
bunch
But,
of
I know,
Richard was a great example. Richard could see relationships between things, and I could get him to go back and explain the chain of logic to me, but he could go from A to H and skip every step in between because he was just that smart. And then the other thing that I'll say, and it's a little bit of a dig, is I learned from a bad example how to end meetings.
Shut up.
No, that's how I ended it.
Me? Am I the dick?
Peter would have, at the all hands meetings would just drag on and on and on and on. And I'm like, Peter, just say shut up and go back to work. Just say it. And so I learned to watch people's faces and see when, all right, the questions are petering out. It's time to say, at where I work, we have a big group all hands meeting every Tuesday morning. And at the end of it, they say, okay, go be awesome.
Yeah.
You don't have to say shut up and go back to work. You can say something else, but there has to be, whoever's running the meeting needs to be able to say, we're done. Go.
So as you can see, here we are, an hour, and this is what I had to put up with back in the 90s.
Totally fair.
Totally
fair.
What a great time I've had with you guys. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank
It was
Thank you
awesome.
Thanks for sharing your
Thanks
story.
for bringing us in.
Absolutely. And thanks to Gen Con TV for broadcasting us. Thanks to Chaldea Studios for being our host. Thanks to Will Geisler as our technical director, Marcus Mays who is our studio manager, Derek Guter, our streaming manager, and this is our last show for this year, live show. We'll probably be like bringing back reruns or something like that. We will be back in January, whatever, around I don't know what date it is. I don't even know who's going to be the guest. Just come back. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be sometime in January. It's going to be great. And have a good holiday season. And we love you, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Hail Krampus.